A foal was born from death, left behind in the heart of the most brutal blizzard Montana had ever seen. Just as hope began to fade, a small dog appeared, and in that moment, destiny changed forever. But fate wasn't done yet. It tore apart a bond that defied every law of nature. Then came a journey. Wild. Unthinkable. 1,000 miles across wind, ice, and silence. For a life or death rescue. On the edge of a deadly ravine. And a reunion so powerful, it brought the world to tears. Do you believe in the kind of friendship that rewrites instinct itself? One forged not in words, but in loyalty and love that never let go. Then get ready, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see animals forever. This is Gallop of Glory, and this is a story you will never forget. The wind screamed like 1,000 wolves across the frozen plains of Montana. Snow tore sideways through the air, slicing the land in violent sheets. There was no horizon, no sky, no ground, only white. A swirling, suffocating void that devoured everything in its path. And somewhere in that white silence, something was dying. Emily Carter could barely see 5 feet ahead. But she didn't stop. Wrapped in wool and grit, her boots cracking over the icy crust, she moved forward with the quiet force of a woman who had spent her life saving what others left behind. She was 38, weathered, scarred, and ready to pay the price of mercy once again. 2 days earlier, wildfire scorched the western ridge. A sudden temperature drop triggered an avalanche near Bitter Creek. The Mustang herd scattered. Some buried, some vanished. Some limped toward the lowlands. But Emily wasn't after the herd. She was after one. The mare. Pregnant. Injured. Alone. Somewhere out here. Buried in wind and silence. She pressed her gloved hand to the transceiver. Static. Dead signal. No backup. No assistant. No guarantee she'd make it out. But that never stopped her before. Then, she saw it. A dark shape in the snow. Still. Shaking. Half covered in drifts. She dropped to her knees, brushing away the ice with frantic, frozen fingers. The mare's body trembled uncontrollably. Her breath. Ragged. Shallow. Blood stained the snow. Dark and spreading fast. Her eyes locked onto Emily's. Wild. Wide. Ancient and pleading. She was in labor. Oh no. No, no, girl, hold on. Emily whispered, tearing off her gloves. Her hands now shaking for a different reason. The storm howled louder, as if the world itself couldn't bear what was coming. Emily had delivered foals before. Dozens. But not like this. Not in -20 degrees. Not here. Not now. Come on, girl. Don't give up on me. She worked fast. Packed snow around the mare's sides. Gathered branches. Braced her body against the wind. The contractions came. Violent. Unforgiving. Blood flowed steadily now. And then, with one final cry, a sound so raw it sliced the air, the mare pushed. Emily held her breath. A slick, trembling form slid into the snow. Tiny. Soaked. barely moving. A foal. God. Emily breathed. You did it. The mare let out one final breath. Long. Soft. Final. And then she was gone. No time to mourn. The foal wasn't breathing. Emily dropped beside him, rubbed his chest, cleared the nose, willed life into that fragile body. Breathe, baby. Come on, breathe. A sputter. A twitch. Then a gasp of air. The foal coughed, blinking once, wobbling to lift his head. Emily exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And for the first time in hours, she let herself collapse. Her eyes burned. From cold, from wind, and from tears she refused to let fall. You little miracle. But the storm wasn't done. And neither was she. No mother. No milk. No herd. No shelter. He wouldn't last an hour out here. Emily reached beneath her coat, unwrapped thermal blankets, tucked the foal against her chest, his heart fluttering against hers, like a match in the wind. I've got you, she whispered. You're not dying out here. Not today. The hike back took over an hour. Every step. A war. Snow erased her tracks. Her legs screamed. Her lungs burned. But she didn't stop. Not with that fragile life clinging to her. Not with hope thudding against her ribs. Willow Creek Sanctuary was silent. When she finally stumbled through the doors, she half-carried, half-dragged the foal into the warmth. Heat lamps blinked on. The scent of hay and cedar wrapped around her. Like memory, she collapsed into the straw. Only then did she really look at him. Chestnut coat. Long lashes. A single white star on his forehead, glowing under the heat lamp. You made it, she whispered. The foal blinked. Unsteady. Soft. And then he exhaled. A breath. A beginning. Emily placed her hand on his forehead. Her voice cracked. Orion, she said. That's your name. A star. A hunter. Born from ice and ash. You're not just a survivor. You're a light. Outside, the wind screamed once more. But this time, it sounded distant. Small. Because inside that barn, beneath the broken sky, something had been reborn. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, etched into the frostbitten bones of Willow Creek. The wind still whistled through the pines, like a warning. But inside the barn, beneath the soft hum of heat lamps, time seemed to slow. Orion lay curled in a nest of straw and thermal blankets. So still. Emily checked his chest twice every hour, just to make sure it was still rising. He had survived the night. But that didn't mean he would survive the week. No mother. No colostrum. No herd to guide him. Only human hands. And hope. Emily leaned over the stall door, watching the tiny foal stir in his sleep. His legs twitched. His lips moved, as if nursing from something that wasn't there. Damn it, she whispered. The next few days would be critical. She knew that. She'd seen it too many times before. Orphans like Orion didn't always make it, especially the ones born too soon, under too much trauma. She was mixing the formula now. Powdered milk, warm distilled water, Her hands moved with the tense precision of a bomb technician. Outside, the sun was trying. Faint streaks of gold bleeding through the snow-glossed treetops. Emily sighed, turned toward the foal stall, and froze. He wasn't alone. Rusty, the old Australian shepherd, had slipped through the barn doors. Silent, steady, with the calm only years of trust could teach. He stood beside the straw bed, head tilted, studying Orion, like a puzzle he'd already solved. Rusty, no, Emily said sharply, dropping the bottle and rushing forward. The dog didn't move, didn't bark. He simply lowered his body, slowly, gently, and slid beside the newborn foal. Emily's boots hit the straw. Hard. Out. Come on. He's too fragile. But Orion stirred. Then, did something she didn't expect. He stretched. Delicately, his nose brushing Rusty's fur. And Rusty stayed still. Let it happen. The contact was brief, soft, but something about it felt ancient, familiar, as if two animals from entirely different worlds had recognized each other. In a single breath, Emily hesitated. I said out, she repeated, more quietly this time. But Rusty didn't leave. Instead, he curled around Orion, his body forming a barrier against the cold. His head rested just behind the foal's neck. And Emily did nothing. She watched. By the second hour, she had stopped trying to separate them. By the sixth, she found herself whispering to no one, "This is insane." And yet, Orion was stronger. He took the bottle now without resistance, nestled against Rusty's side, like a pup in a den. His shivers grew fewer, his breath steadier. The blue in his gums had faded. That night, Emily stood inside the stall, arms crossed, heart tangled, and questions she didn't know how to ask. Rusty licked the foal's forehead, slow, deliberate, like a mother dog cleaning her litter. Orion responded, nuzzling deeper into Rusty's fur. Emily swallowed. She had seen strange bonds before. Goats with chickens, horses with barn cats. But this was different. This was intentional. Rusty wasn't tolerating the foal. He had chosen him. By morning, she found them the same way, curled together beneath the heat lamp, steam rising softly from their shared warmth. She took photos, not for documentation, but for memory. In case. Well, just in case. Orion's legs were still wobbly, his coordination clumsy, but he was alert, watching Rusty's movements, following his lead, even in the smallest things. Where to lie, when to shift, when to breathe slower. It was Rusty who paced the stall when Orion was due for a feeding. Rusty who barked once, never twice, when the foal stirred in distress. Rusty who pressed his body close each night, like a guardian, who had nothing left to protect in the world, except this trembling life. Emily eventually stopped sleeping in the barn. Not because she stopped worrying, but because, somehow, Rusty never did. Day 5. Emily stood by the stall, arms resting on the top rail. She watched him through the early morning mist. "He's not just helping," she said aloud. Mostly to herself. "He's parenting." The sanctuary's vet, Dr. Keller, stood beside her in silence. He'd come to check Orion's vitals. And now, he too, just watched. "You ever seen anything like it?" she asked. "Not like this," he said. "I've seen dogs attached to foals. Usually after imprinting." He nodded toward the pair. "But this?" He exhaled. "This is something else." Emily looked at Rusty. Then at Orion. "Should I separate them?" she asked. "I mean, he's not a horse." Dr. Keller smiled softly. "No. But whatever he is, he's exactly what that one needs." Emily exhaled. It wasn't science. It wasn't protocol. But it was working. And sometimes, that's all that mattered. That night, she opened the stall gate. Just a little wider. Not to let Rusty out, but to let him in. Fully. Freely. As if saying, "I trust you." She whispered to him as he passed. "You're not just watching over him. You're raising him." Rusty paused, tilted his head, then turned back to Orion, and lay down beside him, as if to say, "I know." The snow melted slowly that spring. Willow Creek unfroze in layers. Mud, grass, and the breath of animals returning to rhythm. Birds sang again. The earth turned softer. And in the center of it all, a strange little bond bloomed stronger by the day. Orion grew. Not fast, but steady. And always beside him, like a living shadow with four white paws, was Rusty. They moved through the days, like two souls stitched from different worlds. One hooved, one pawed, but stitched all the same. Their pace synchronized. Their gaze aligned. Their bodies always drawn toward each other. By instinct, not habit. Emily stopped trying to explain it. She simply watched. And sometimes, when no one was looking, she smiled. Like a child. Orion's legs, once wobbly and thin, now carried him with the awkward pride of youth. Tall and clumsy. Endearing. Sometimes even hilarious. He grew taller than Rusty in just a few weeks. But size never changed the way they moved together. If anything, it made it funnier. One morning, as Emily mucked the paddock, she spotted Rusty trotting across the field, with a bright red rubber ball in his mouth. Orion followed close behind. Long legs clumsy, neck extended, lips twitching with curiosity. Rusty dropped the ball with a bark, tail wagging, and Orion, bless his heart, tried to do the same. He lowered his head, nudged the ball, opened his mouth, and with clomp, the ball slipped out sideways. Again, and again. Rusty barked once, circled around, nudged the ball back. Like, "No, try again." Orion tried, fumbled, lost it, then snorted, a sound that could only be described as childish frustration, and flopped to the ground with an exaggerated grunt. Emily laughed out loud. Rusty patted over, dropped the ball next to Orion's hoof, and sat. Just sat. As if to say, You don't have to be good. Just play. And Orion, tail flicking lazily, nuzzled his friend in reply. That became their ritual. Every morning. Ball. Chase. Fumble. Flop. It wasn't about winning. It was about doing it. Together. But Rusty learned, too. In the afternoons, when the sun grew lazy and golden, Orion would wander to the east fence line, where the grass grew tall and warm. There, he'd lower himself with all the awkward grace of a young horse, still figuring out what legs were for. He'd stretch out, neck long, eyes half closed, soaking in the light, not sleeping, just being. And Rusty began doing the same. At first, he only sat beside him. Then, curious, he started lying down, on his side, nose toward the sky, breathing in unison. It wasn't rest. It wasn't play. It was communion. Two creatures, different in body, but not in soul, learning what peace felt like from each other. They developed a language no one else could hear. It wasn't made of words. It was movement, sound, timing. When Rusty gave a single, sharp bark, Orion turned his head. Every time. When Orion let out a low, fluttering nicker, a sound the humans thought meant nothing, Rusty would perk up, ears forward, and walk to him. Immediately, they had their own calls, their own rhythm. Sometimes it was as simple as a look. Sometimes it was silence. One rainy evening, a thunderclap cracked across the hills. The yearling herd panicked. Young horses scattered, rearing, snorting, stomping in the mud. But Orion froze, ears rigid, legs locked. He didn't run. From the far end of the corral, Rusty barked once. Short, low. Orion turned, walked toward him. Without hesitation, they stood together as the rain fell heavy around them, side by side, heads lowered, solid, anchored. No panic, no chaos, just trust. Emily stood under the barn awning. She watched them for a long time, then whispered, "I've never seen anything like it." Weeks passed, then months. Orion filled out, shoulders broader, chest deeper, tail fuller. His coat shimmered in the light, a reddish bronze that looked like fire caught in motion. He had the form of a Mustang, but the calm of something else, something raised by patience and presence. Rusty aged, too. Gray appeared around his muzzle, but his stride never once fell behind. One crisp morning in July, Emily opened the front gate early. She found them waiting. Orion stood still, his head gently lowered, resting on Rusty's back. They weren't grazing. They weren't playing. They were just being, as if the day didn't start, until they found one another first. Emily took out her phone, snapped a photo, labeled it later as Morning Ritual, Day 112. But no label could ever truly explain what it was, because no one else could hear their language. No one else would ever understand. What passed between hoof and paw, eye and ear, breath and breath. But Emily didn't need to understand. She only needed to witness it. And every time she did, she remembered something she'd almost forgotten. That love, in its purest form, isn't loud, isn't flashy, and doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes, love looks like a dog, teaching a horse how to lie still in the sun, and a horse teaching a dog when to simply be still. Together. The letter came on a Tuesday. A beige envelope. No logo. No stamp. Just a name. Neatly printed. Inked so clean. It made Emily's fingers tremble. Nathaniel Blake. She had heard the name before. Everyone in the equine rescue world had. A Texas philanthropist. Heir to an oil empire. Known for two things: saving horses and turning them into stars. Therapeutic riding. Liberty performances. Equine ballet. Whatever the label, his facilities were the best money could build. And now, apparently, he wanted Orion. Emily read the letter. Again. And again. I visited Willow Creek under a pseudonym in July. What I witnessed between the Mustang and the dog was unlike anything I've seen in 30 years. Orion is extraordinary. I'd like to make you a proposal. And there it was. An offer. Far more than what the ranch was worth. Enough to fund the sanctuary for 5 years. Enough to save every horse on the waiting list. Pay vet bills. Fix fences. Restock hay for winter. Enough to rescue dozens more. But it would mean saying goodbye to Orion. Emily didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, she walked out to the east pasture, where the light poured like honey through tall, golden grass. And there they were. Rusty, lying in the shade, paws crossed, nose twitching. Orion, standing over him, his shadow blanketing Rusty's side, nudging him gently to keep him awake. They weren't playing. They weren't sleeping. They were just existing. Emily's throat tightened. What was the price of peace? That night, she sat at the kitchen table until nearly dawn. The contract lay open in front of her, untouched, unmoved, heavy. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't know if she could survive it. Willow Creek was dying. The drought last fall. The feed costs. The collapsed barn roof. The rising vet bills. They were drowning in silence. And Nathaniel Blake had thrown her a lifeline. But it came with a hook. The next morning, she met him in person. He arrived in a black SUV, so clean it looked allergic to dust. His boots were spotless. His hands were soft. But his eyes were kind. And somehow, that made it worse. "You're doing good work here," he said. "Important work." Emily nodded. Didn't speak. They walked to the fence, where Orion and Rusty stood, side by side, watching. Nathaniel's voice softened. "I've seen connection before. But this is something sacred. Then why take it apart?" Emily asked, barely above a whisper. Nathaniel looked at her, almost apologetic, because he could help more. Autistic children, veterans, people who've forgotten what gentleness feels like. Orion could remind them. Emily swallowed. Her voice cracked. He already reminds someone. Nathaniel was quiet. Then he handed her the folder. I know what I'm asking. But I'm not just buying a horse. I'm offering you the chance to save everything this place stands for. Emily didn't sleep that night, but she signed. When the sun came up, it didn't feel warm anymore. The trailer arrived. 2 days later, it rolled down the gravel with a low mechanical hum. 2 handlers, navy uniforms, professional, polished, painless, until it wasn't. Emily tried to do it gently. She haltered Orion like always. Soft voice, steady hands, calming touch. Rusty paced beside them. Back and forth. Back and forth. Then he stopped. Stiffened. Whimpered once. He knew. Orion stepped into the trailer. Reluctantly, but calm. Until the ramp began to rise. That's when Rusty lunged. He barked. Loud. Frantic. His nails scraped against the ramp. His body slammed forward. Again. And again. Orion reared inside. Kicking. Neighing. Letting out a sound so raw, Emily had to look away. One handler reached for Rusty. Emily raised a hand. Let him say goodbye. But Rusty wasn't saying goodbye. He was begging, howling, pleading, clawing at the distance. His eyes wild, with confusion, with betrayal, with grief. And Orion, behind the slats, pressed his face to the bars. He let out a low, throaty cry. A sound no one at Willow Creek had ever heard before. A sound that wasn't just grief. It was the sound of a heart breaking in half. The trailer pulled away. Rusty chased it. Nearly half a mile. Then he stopped. Stood panting. Staring down the empty road. He didn't move. Not for minutes. Not for hours. Emily found him that night. Curled in the dirt. Silent. She tried to lift him. He didn't respond. For the next 3 days, Rusty refused to eat. No bark. No wag. No following anyone. He just lay beside Orion's empty stall. Nose pressed to the wood. As if waiting for it to breathe again. Volunteers left food. Water. Treats. Nothing changed. Emily sat with him in the evenings. Whispered apologies. That came too late. He didn't understand, Rust. She said softly. How could he? And in that silence, something inside her cracked. Because she hadn't just sent away a horse. She had torn apart a language, ripped a soul from its mirror, separated 2 beings who had no words, but carried all the meaning in the world. Some said animals don't grieve. They hadn't seen Rusty. They hadn't heard the silence, the whimpers in his sleep, the way his body curled into the same shape Orion used to fill, as if memory itself could still keep him warm. Willow Creek stayed quiet after that. Not the kind of quiet that heals. The kind that waits. The Texas sky was whiter than anything Orion had ever seen. But it felt smaller. The fences stretched longer. The pastures looked greener. The barns painted white. Spotless. Sterile. Everything in perfect order. Except him. From the moment his hooves touched this new land, something inside him curled inward. He didn't neigh. Didn't gallop. Didn't respond. When the other horses approached with curiosity, he just stood by the far gate. Still. Quiet. Staring north. As if the wind might carry something back to him. Nathaniel's handlers were patient. They gave him space. Fed him well. Kept him clean. But they didn't understand why he wouldn't eat from their hand. Why he flinched at sudden movement. Why, at night, he paced in slow, worn circles, as if trying to carve a path back home. He's not adjusting, one of the staff said. Nathaniel watched from the loft. Arms folded. Eyes tight. He's grieving, he finally replied. Then added, but they said horses move on. Someone whispered, he's not just a horse. And no one said another word after that. Weeks passed. Then a month. Orion grew thinner. His coat dulled. His muscles faded. He refused the training paddock. Refused the stall. Refused to look at the geldings in the herd. Every sound startled him. Every shadow. An echo of something that used to be there. And every night, he stood in the same corner of the pasture, ears forward, eyes locked, on a direction no one could name. Sometimes, he let out that sound again. The low, broken whinny. He had cried. When the trailer left Montana, it wasn't a call. Wasn't a scream. It was remembering. Back in Montana, the silence inside Willow Creek had become something else. It had become absence. Rusty had stopped eating. Days ago. No bark. No tail wag. No interest in food or touch or Emily's voice. He spent his hours curled beside Orion's empty stall. At night, he crawled beneath the feed trough, the last place Orion had nuzzled him. His ribs showed now. His eyes sunken. The white on his muzzle, grayer than ever. Emily sat beside him every night. Guilt coiled around her chest like a noose. She had made the right decision. The logical one. The responsible one. Hadn't she? But logic never stood a chance against the look in Rusty's eyes. On the 34th day, Emily opened her laptop and called Nathaniel. His face appeared. Tired. Troubled. You see it too, don't you? She asked. He nodded. Slow. Heavy. He's not doing well. I want to bring him home, Emily said, her voice cracking. Nathaniel didn't argue. I'll make arrangements, he said. Then paused. He doesn't belong here. He never did. That night, for the first time in weeks, Emily allowed herself to hope. She went to the barn, knelt beside Rusty, and whispered, "He's coming back, boy. Just hold on. A little longer." Rusty didn't move. didn't blink. But for the briefest moment, his ear twitched. The rain began. The next morning, first as a drizzle, then a downpour, then a wall. Willow Creek had weathered many storms, but this one came too fast, too wild, too cruel. By noon, the river had jumped its banks. By 3 p.m., the pastures were underwater. Emily and the volunteers scrambled to move the horses to higher ground, calling names through the wind, mud swallowing their boots, water climbing past their knees. And Rusty was missing. Someone thought they saw him near the East Ridge. Then the radio cut. The power dropped. The road collapsed. By dusk, Emily was screaming his name into the storm. Rusty! Rusty, come back! No voice answered. Only the roar of floodwater tearing through the canyon. She searched until her voice was gone. Searched even when they told her to stop. Even when it was too dark to see. She searched until all that was left was silence and the sound of water where land used to be. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, Orion lifted his head. A storm passed through Texas, too. But it wasn't the thunder that made him uneasy. It was something else. Something distant. Something gone. He turned again toward the north. Ears forward. Still. Waiting. For a bark that would never come. The night Texas went quiet. Orion didn't sleep. He stood in the corner of his pasture. Ears forward. Eyes unblinking. Nose twitching. Against the electric scent in the wind. He didn't know why. He just knew. Something was wrong. Deeply, achingly wrong. Like something had been torn. Like a voice had vanished before it could cry for help. At 3:12 a.m., the wind shifted. Orion lifted his head higher. Then he moved. First at a walk. Then a trot. Then a full, frantic gallop. Not away from something, but toward it. Toward him. The fence stood 10 feet tall, reinforced with aluminum rails and electric lines. A show horse couldn't break it. No one thought a Mustang would even try. But Orion was no longer just a Mustang. He charged. Once. Twice. On the third try, he burst through the gate. Like a cannonball of instinct and memory. The alarm screamed. Lights blinked on. Handlers shouted from the barn. But Orion was already gone. Dust and hoofbeats. Swallowed by the night. And a storm of fate. Rising behind him. By morning, his disappearance made the news. Valuable Mustang missing from Therapy Ranch in Texas. Horse escapes elite facility, last seen heading north. But no one knew why. Not yet. He ran for hours. Then days. Through plains. Down back roads. Past cattle fields. Over fences. He didn't stop. For signs or sirens. Or boundaries drawn by men. Something pulled him. Not hunger. Not instinct. But memory. And love. On the third day, he reached Interstate 35. It stretched ahead like a metallic river, filled with screaming tires, blinding lights, and chaos. He waited by the roadside, head low, ears back, until there was a break in the traffic. Then he sprinted. Drivers slammed on brakes. Horns blared. A man threw his coffee and cursed. But Orion never looked, left or right. He flew over the asphalt, through the screech, across 6 lanes of American frenzy, like a ghost riding the wind. The dashcam footage went viral by noon. By the 5th day, a family in Oklahoma found him grazing by their pond. The mother, a horse trainer, noticed the star-shaped mark on his forehead. "That's the one," she whispered. "The one looking for someone." They tried to catch him. He let the little girl touch his nose. But when they led him toward the barn, he turned and walked away. North, in Kansas, he swam across a swollen river. As helicopters circled above, someone called him the Miracle Mustang. In Missouri, he trotted through cornfields at sunrise, steam rising from his back, like a spirit reborn. A retired vet left out a steel bucket of water. Orion drank, then stared deep into the old man's eyes, as if to ask, "Have you seen him?" The man nodded once and whispered, "Whatever you're chasing, don't stop." He crossed into Colorado in the dead of night, thin, muddy, but eyes still fierce, and hooves steady. Animal control tried to trap him near Fort Collins. He leapt the barricade, silent as a shadow, and vanished into the hills. By the 8th day, America had a new obsession. Mustang on a mission. Thousands watched for Orion. One horse, one journey, one impossible goal. People lined fences, left out apples, left hay by the roadside. Volunteers tracked him with drones, but never close enough to stop him. They just watched and wept and whispered, "He's going home." Near the Wyoming border, a boy stood in the snow with a red scarf. He had followed the journey, read every headline, waited for hours. When Orion passed, he slowed, lowered his head. The boy stepped forward, held up the scarf, and Orion touched it, just enough, then moved on, silently, unstoppably. In Montana, Emily stared at a national map, hands trembling, eyes full of disbelief. "That's impossible," a reporter said. "No horse can travel that far." Emily looked out at the hills, eyes stinging, heart pounding. "You don't know this horse." She didn't tell them about the bond or the bark he still waited for, or the storm she hadn't forgiven herself for. She just whispered, "Please, let me be there when he arrives." And somewhere, beneath a starlit sky, cold, wild, wide, a horse with a fading coat and a fire in his chest took another step north. Not for survival, not for fame, but for a heartbeat he couldn't live without. For a voice he hadn't heard in days. For the dog who had taught him what family truly meant. On the 24th day of his journey, Orion appeared on the ridgeline, just 5 miles from Willow Creek. It was sunrise. The sky still bleeding orange. The air still choked with the scent of storm and loss. Emily reached him within the hour. Engine screaming. Tires spitting gravel. She leapt from the truck. Heart thudding. He stood there. Thinner. Muddier. Older. But he was Orion. And he was alive. Fix, she called softly. The name only Rusty had ever used. His ears flicked toward her. But he didn't move closer. He turned. And trotted away. Toward the east fork of the canyon. Emily blinked. Stunned. Confused. He's not coming home, she whispered. He's still looking. She followed. In silence. Through narrow trails. Through thickets still soaked from the storm. Until the ground fell away beneath her. And the canyon opened. Like a scar in the earth. Jagged cliffs. Broken trees. And the sound of rushing water. Too fast. Too deep. Cutting through rock like fury. Then. She heard it. A bark. Faint. Cracked. Barely there. Rusty, she gasped, breaking into a run. Orion was already there. Pacing the ledge. Head low. Hooves testing each inch of unstable ground. 20 feet below. On a sliver of rock barely wide enough to lie down. Lay Rusty. Collapsed. Shivering. Still breathing. Somehow. The radio crackled to life. We found him, Emily said. But it's bad. He's trapped. The ravine's unstable. 40 minutes later. The rescue team arrived. Ropes. Harnesses. Helmets. Emergency packs. The lead technician surveyed the scene. His face went tight. We can't lower anyone safely, he said. The whole edge is crumbling. We need a helicopter, someone added. That's hours away, Emily snapped. He doesn't have hours. Rusty didn't lift his head. Only his tail. Twitched once. His eyes barely open. And Orion. Still pacing. Still searching. Then he stopped. Stared directly at the rescue harness. The lead tech frowned. Is he calculating? Mark, Emily's assistant, spoke up. He wants to help. Someone scoffed. He's a horse. Emily stepped forward. Voice like flint. He's not just a horse. The plan was wild. Reckless. Barely sane. But it was the only chance they had. A makeshift pulley. Secured to Orion's chest and shoulders. The other end tied to a rescue tech. Lightweight. Agile. Ready to go down with a second harness. For Rusty. Emily approached him slowly. Whispered as she stroked his neck. Fix, stand. He didn't flinch. Didn't move. He braced. Lowered his head. And held. The rescue tech began descending. Inch by inch. Orion stood motionless. Then. The cliff shifted. A rock slide. The rope yanked. The weight jerked sideways. The ledge cracked. Shouts rang out. But Orion adjusted. Just enough. Leaning back. Muscles tense. Hooves planted. Holding the line. Like he'd done this all his life. Below, the tech reached Rusty, wrapped him in the sling, secured each buckle, hands shaking. "Go," she called. "Pull him up, slow." The ascent began. Orion's ears flicked. The rope shifted again. Emily gave the signal. "Fix, back. Steady." He obeyed. One hoof at a time. Muscles straining. Eyes locked on the ravine. The rope creaked. The wind screamed. The cliff groaned. But they kept going. Foot by foot by foot. Then, a black nose rose over the edge. A paw. A leg. And finally, all of him. Rusty. Broken. But breathing. The vet rushed in. Checked vitals. Dehydrated. Fractures. Infected wounds. But he'll make it. Only then did Emily release Orion from the harness. He didn't run. Didn't bolt. He walked. Slowly. To the stretcher. Lowered his head. Touched his muzzle. To Rusty's face. A breath. A pause. And then a sound escaped his throat. Not a whinny. Not a snort. Something in between. A sound only Rusty would know. And Rusty opened one eye. Weak. Flickering. But he saw him. And his tail wagged once. Just once. Then fell still again. No one spoke. Not the techs. Not the volunteers. Not the cameraman, who had arrived late, but caught every second. Emily wiped her eyes. The silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. In that ravine, on shattered earth, a horse and a dog had done the impossible. They had found each other. Across silence. Across pain. Across time. And in doing so, they reminded everyone watching that sometimes the strongest lifeline is the one you cannot see. 3 days after the rescue, Rusty opened both eyes. Longer than a blink. Longer than a breath. Emily was there, kneeling beside him, in the infirmary stall. Hands trembling. Heart caught between fear and hope. "You're still here," she whispered. His tail thumped. Twice. Soft. Uneven. But alive. Across the barn. In a separate paddock. Lined with blankets. And soft hay. Orion stood at the gate. He hadn't eaten much. Hadn't rested either. Every few hours, he'd rise, step forward, and let out a quiet, fluttering sound. A half call. A half question. No human could translate it. But Emily understood. Is he still with me? By day 4, the vet nodded gently. We can try. Emily opened the gate. Between them, no one spoke. Not a breath in the room. Orion stepped forward. One hoof. Then another. Then he stopped. Rusty hadn't moved. But his ears had. Tilted. Listening. Then, ever so slightly, his head turned. And their eyes met. Orion crossed the distance. Without hesitation. He didn't gallop. Didn't snort. Didn't make a sound. He just lowered himself. onto the straw beside Rusty, legs folded carefully, neck curling in, until his body pressed against his brother's. Like no time had passed. Rusty let out a weak breath, then nudged his nose into Orion's mane. Not a bark, not a cry, just touch. And it was enough. Emily turned away, tears rising too fast to stop. She hadn't cried like that in years. Not out of sorrow, but because something inside her had just broken open. Or maybe healed. She couldn't tell which. The sanctuary was quiet that evening. No visitors. No press. Just the wind, returning to the hills, as if the land itself was finally breathing again. She sat outside the barn, watching the stars appear, one by one, above the ridge Orion had first stood on. And she whispered, "To love like that, to know like that, what else on earth can even compare?" By the end of the week, Rusty could stand, briefly. And Orion? He refused to sleep anywhere more than 5 feet away. Emily made a decision, not just about recovery, but about permanence. She cleared the south pasture, hired builders, ordered custom gates, reinforced fencing, shaded shelters, a new enclosure, 10 acres, private, peaceful, and at its center, a shared living space, big enough for a Mustang, warm enough for a dog, designed not with species in mind, but something greater, a bond. Volunteers called it the Brothers' Haven, but Emily just smiled and called it home. Weeks passed, then months. Rusty walked again, slow, limping, but with fire in his eyes. Orion regained his strength. His coat shimmered red again in the sun. Every morning, they began the day the same. Rusty would bark once, and Orion would lift his head. And the world, however broken, would feel whole. For a little while longer. A month later, they came by the hundreds. From Montana, from Oregon, from New York, even from across the ocean. Veterans, children, ranchers, reporters, people who had never touched a horse, but had wept when they heard what Orion had done. Willow Creek had never seen a crowd like this. The fields were lined with folding chairs and tents, but most people chose to stand, as if something sacred should not be witnessed sitting down. At the center, beneath a canvas archway, woven with wildflowers, stood Emily, hands clasped, voice steady, eyes full, and beside her, in the open paddock, stood Orion, his coat gleaming bronze in the late afternoon light, and Rusty, still limping, but tail wagging, with a quiet strength in his gaze that hushed the entire gathering. Emily took a breath, then stepped forward. "I've spent my whole life with animals," she began, rescuing them, studying them, trying to protect them. She paused, then said softly, "But nothing." Her voice cracked gently. "Nothing ever taught me as much as watching these two." She turned. Orion lowered his head, Rusty sat beside him, ears alert. They are not the same species, she continued. They don't share blood. They don't speak the same language. And yet, they found each other, held onto each other, crossed storms, mountains, even death itself, to be together again. She paused, let silence carry the weight, then spoke the words that would echo across every heart in the crowd. Love, real love, doesn't care what body it's born into. It doesn't check bloodlines or labels or names. It simply finds what it needs and holds on through anything. The crowd stood in absolute stillness. Some wiped away tears. Some closed their eyes. But no one looked away. Because in that moment, they weren't just listening to a speech. They were remembering someone, something, some part of themselves they thought the world had taken. Emily continued, I thought I was the one saving them. But truth is, they saved each other. And in doing so, they saved us all. She looked out over the gathering. They reminded us that no matter how far we've fallen, no matter how long we've wandered, there's still something worth believing in. When the applause came, it wasn't loud. It wasn't thunderous. It was gentle, like the kind of peace that only comes after a storm. As the sun dipped low behind the Montana hills, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Some left letters. Others left drawings. Children waved from the fence line as Orion nudged Rusty softly toward the pasture gate. And when the day ended, when the final light spilled gold over the tall grass, Emily stood at the edge of the field, watching them. Orion lay down first, legs tucked beneath him, neck arched. Rusty circled once, then curled into the hollow between his friend's front legs. They didn't move. They didn't need to, because for the first time in a long, long while, everything was whole. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, not from grief, but from something deeper, more lasting, and smiled, because she knew that this moment, this silence, this golden stillness beneath a Montana sky was no longer just memory. It was legacy. It was a monument carved not in stone, but in loyalty, and it would never fade. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Leave a comment below. Tell us who you thought of. A friend. A moment. A bond that defied logic. Tap like if you believe in the quiet power of love that crosses all boundaries. And don't forget to subscribe to Gallop of Glory, so you never miss a story that just might change the way you see the world. Because here, every heartbeat matters, every soul counts, and every bond, no matter how unlikely, has a story worth telling.